She never imagined a quiet evening at the Silver Creek Saloon would turn into a bloodbath. The thunder of horses' hooves shattered the peace of the mountain town, and in moments Natasa Matthews would find herself surrounded by the deadliest. Outlaws this side of the Rockies. The Carson Boys weren't known for mercy, and as their leader circled her like a vulture, she could feel her heart steady itself with familiar calm. But what these dangerous men didn't know, what nobody in Silver Creek knew, was that the quiet saloon girl was about to teach them the most lethal lesson of their lives. They thought Natasa Matthews was just another pretty face serving drinks. They saw her gentle smile, her delicate hands, her unassuming manner. They assumed she was weak, someone they could push around, someone they could terrorize. They were about to learn how wrong they were. In the next few minutes, the Carson Boys would discover they hadn't just picked on any saloon girl. They had threatened a Marine Corps sniper, and some mistakes you only make once. The late afternoon sun casts long shadows through the windows of the Silver Creek Saloon, where the gentle clinking of glasses and murmur of conversation creates a symphony of normalcy. Natasa Matthews moves. With practiced grace between the tables, her steps light and measured, every movement calculated despite appearing casual. At 28, she carries herself with the confidence of someone who has seen far more than the patrons could imagine, though she keeps that knowledge hidden behind warm smiles and friendly banter. The saloon itself is a testament to the town's character. Solid timber walls weathered by mountain storms, floors worn smooth by countless boots, and windows that offer a clear view of both Main Street and the mountain pass beyond. To most, it's simply the heart of Silver Creek, a place where miners, ranchers, and travelers gather to wash away the day's dust. But to Natasa, it's both refuge and observation post, each table and corner catalogued with professional precision. Old. Tom Murphy sits at his usual spot by the bar, nursing a whiskey while telling anyone who'll listen about his days prospecting up in the high country. Near the piano, a group of ranch hands celebrate a successful cattle drive, their laughter carrying across the room. By the far wall, a pair of traders discuss the latest silver prices, their voices low and serious. Natasa knows them all, their habits, their stories, their patterns. It's second nature to her now, just as tracking targets once was. The evening light streaming through the windows takes on a golden quality, the kind that makes the brass railings gleam and the bottles behind the bar shine like jewels. Natasa pauses at the bar, arranging her serving tray with fresh glasses, when something makes her pause. A subtle shift in the atmosphere, a change in the quality of light, signs that most would miss, but that years of training have taught her to notice. Through the front windows, she catches the movement first. Dust rising from the road leading into town. Then comes the sound, not yet audible to the other patrons, but clear to her trained senses. The rhythmic beat of multiple horses approaching at a controlled pace. Not the casual arrival of traders or the hurried pace of a courier, but the deliberate advance of men who want their approach to be felt as much as heard. Behind the bar, Marcus Kane, the saloon owner, continues polishing glasses, unaware of the approaching threat. He'd given Natasa a job 6 months ago, no questions asked, accepting her story of seeking a fresh start out west at face value. He'd never pressed when she installed extra locks on the storeroom door, or when she rearranged the tables to eliminate blind spots, or when she insisted on taking the upstairs room with the clearest view of the street. Natasa's fingers brush against the familiar weight at her thigh, hidden beneath her skirts. A model 1873 Colt nestled in a specially modified holster. Winty, her boot, a combat knife, rests in a custom sheath, its presence as natural to her as breathing. Up in her room, secured in a false bottom of her trunk, lies the disassembled pieces of something far more lethal, a weapon that speaks to a past she'd hoped to leave behind. The approaching riders are closer now, their hoofbeats clear enough that other patrons begin to notice. Conversations start to quiet. Heads turn toward the windows, and the atmosphere shifts as the dust cloud grows larger. Natasa continues her work, her movements unchanged, but her mind is already calculating angles, assessing cover, noting potential. Weapons within reach. The heavy mirror behind the bar could provide a view of blind spots. The kitchen door offers a secondary exit. The support beams could provide cover if needed. Old Tom's voice falters mid-story as the first riders come into view. The Carson Boys enter town like a dark tide, their horses' hooves striking the packed earth with ominous rhythm. Natasa counts them through the window's reflection. 12. Riders, heavily armed, moving with the coordinated precision of men used to working together. Their long dusters can't quite hide the arsenal they carry, and their wide-brimmed hats cast shadows over faces hardened by violence. The saloon grows, quieter still as the riders dismount outside, their spurs ringing against the wooden sidewalk. Natasa feels the weight of the moment settle around her, heavy as a sniper's ghillie suit. In the settling dust, she can make out the infamous bear skull emblem on their saddles, the calling card of the Carson Boys, a gang known for their brutality across 3 territories. Marcus's hand strays beneath the bar, where Natasa knows he keeps a scattergun. She catches his eye and shakes her head slightly. Not yet. Sometimes the hardest part of being a predator is knowing when to let your prey walk closer, when to let them think they have the advantage. As the saloon's batwing doors begin to swing open, Natasa Matthews straightens her apron, adjusts her smile, and prepares to demonstrate why some of the deadliest creatures in nature are the ones that don't look dangerous at all. The batwing doors slam open with enough force to rattle the bottles behind the bar, and Wade Carson strides in like he owns the place, his boots leaving dusty prints on the well-swept floor. He's a big man, tall and broad-shouldered, with a face that might have been handsome before violence carved its permanent sneer into his features. Behind him, his men file in with practiced precision, spreading out to cover the exits with the ease of predators who've done this 1,000 times before. Natasa keeps wiping glasses at the bar, her movements unhurried, deliberate. Through the mirror's reflection, she catalogues their weapons with professional detachment. Winchester repeaters, Colt revolvers, at least 2 Derringers poorly concealed in sleeve holsters. The way they move tells her more. These aren't common bandits. They've had training, probably military. Confederate cavalry, if she had to guess. Men who never quite let go of the war. Well, well, Wade's voice carries across the suddenly silent saloon. What do we have here? He removes his hat with exaggerated courtesy, revealing steel-gray hair and eyes that never learned mercy. Mighty fine establishment you're running? His gaze sweeps the room, lingering on Natasa with an intensity that would make most women flinch. She doesn't. She's had far more dangerous men in her crosshairs. Marcus steps forward, his hands carefully visible on the bar. Welcome to Silver Creek Saloon, gentlemen. What can I get you? His voice is steady, but Natasa catches the slight tremor in his fingers. He knows who these men are, knows the stories that follow in their wake. Wade ignores him, his attention fixed on Natasa. Ain't you a pretty little thing? He moves closer, spurs jingling with each deliberate step. What's your name, darling? Natasa, she replies, her voice neutral, neither inviting nor hostile. She continues her work, measuring each movement, maintaining the appearance of routine while her mind calculates distances, angles, potential scenarios. The nearest Carson boy is 7 steps to her left, hand resting too casually near his holster. The 2 by the door are watching the street, which means they're expecting trouble or planning to cause it. Natasa, Wade repeats, drawing out the syllables like he's tasting them. You know who we are, Natasa? Behind him, his men have completely cleared one corner of the saloon, forcing the other patrons to cluster together like scared cattle. Old Tom Murphy's face has gone pale, his whiskey forgotten. The ranch hands who were celebrating earlier now sit in tense silence, their hands flat on the table where the outlaws can see them. "I've heard stories," Natasa says, carefully placing another clean glass on the shelf. In her peripheral vision, she notes how Wade's second-in-command, a lean man with a knife scar across his throat, has positioned himself to cover the kitchen. You're professional, tactical. These men aren't just outlaws, they're soldiers gone bad. Wade laughs, the sound sharp and cold as a winter storm. Stories. Oh, honey, the stories don't do us justice. He leans against the bar, too close now, invading her space with deliberate menace. See, we've been thinking about expanding our operation. Silver Creek's got potential, quiet, isolated, perfect spot for our kind of business. Natasa steps back, not in fear, but to maintain optimal distance. Her right hand is exactly 3 inches from where her hidden Colt rests against her thigh. "This is a peaceful town," she says, injecting just the right amount of nervousness into her voice. "We don't want any trouble." "Trouble?" Another laugh, echoed by his men. "Sweetheart, trouble's already here. Question is, are you folks going to be smart about it?" He turns to address the room at large, though his eyes never leave Natasa. "Here's how this works. Silver Creek's under new management. You want to keep your businesses running? You pay. Us protection. Want to keep your pretty faces intact? You do as we say." The scarred man by the kitchen speaks up, his voice a raspy whisper thanks to whatever blade gave him that throat wound. "Boss, maybe we should demonstrate our commitment to community service." His hand strays to his belt, where a heavy brass knuckle-duster gleams dully in the fading light. Natasa maintains her composure, but something shifts in her stance, a subtle change that only another predator would notice. Wade catches it, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Something on your mind, darling?" he asks, his tone deceptively gentle. "You should leave," Natasa says, her voice steady despite the fear she's supposed to be showing. "Sheriff Rogers is taking a long nap in his office." Wade cuts her off, smile widening. "Seems he had an unfortunate accident with the butt of a rifle. He'll wake up eventually, probably. Meanwhile..." He reaches for Natasa's face, but she steps back again, maintaining that crucial distance. "I wouldn't," she warns quietly, knowing they'll take it as fear rather than the genuine caution it is. She can see Marcus from the corner of her eye. His hand inching toward the scattergun again. A subtle headshake stops him. Not yet. Timing is everything, in shooting and in life. "Oh?" Wade straightens to his full height, trying to loom over her. "And why's that? Your daddy gonna come save you, your sweetheart." His voice drops to a menacing whisper. "Where is your sweetheart, anyway? Out playing cowboy while his woman faces the big bad world alone." The other Carson boys close in, their leather dusters creaking as they move. The late afternoon sun catches on well-oiled gunmetal and cruel smiles. Natasa's mind races through scenarios, contingencies, remembering similar situations in different terrains, desert compounds, mountain passes, urban ruins. Different enemies, same predatory intent. "Maybe we should stick around," the scarred man suggests, eyes never leaving Natasa. "Show these fine folks how real men run a business." His brass knuckles catch the light as he flexes his fingers, and Natasa notes the way his weight shifts forward, preparing for violence. Amateur tell. In another life, she'd have corrected that tendency in training. Here, she simply files it away as tactical intelligence. Natasa maintains her position behind the bar, each movement measured, deliberate. The familiar rhythm of controlled breathing centers her just as it did when she lay prone on distant ridges, crosshairs steady on far-off targets. "Last chance," she says softly, letting a tremor enter her voice that the Carson boys will mistake for fear rather than the combat breathing it really is. "Walk away now, and we can forget this happened." Wade's smile widens, showing teeth that gleam like a wolf's in the fading light. "Oh, we're way past walking away, sweetheart." He reaches across the bar, intending to grab her arm. "Time to learn how things work in the real world." Before his fingers can make contact, Natasa shifts, a movement so subtle most wouldn't notice. But it puts her just beyond his reach, while maintaining perfect access to her concealed weapon. The motion catches Wade's attention, and something flickers in his eyes. Years of violence have taught him to recognize threats, but he can't quite reconcile what his instincts are telling him with the seemingly helpless saloon girl before him. "Got some training, do you?" he asks, voice hardening slightly. "Somebody teach you some fancy moves?" He glances at his men, who've grown quieter, more focused. They can sense it too. Something's not quite right about their supposedly easy target. Marcus chooses that moment to speak up, his voice steady despite his obvious fear. "Miss Natasa, maybe you should go check on the kitchen." "Miss Natasa ain't going anywhere," the scarred man cuts in, moving to block the kitchen door. "Completely. Boss, something about this one. She moves wrong." "Wrong?" Wade laughs, but there's an edge to it now. What's wrong is she thinks she's too good to show proper respect to her new management. He turns back to Natasa, all pretense of charm. "Gone. Last chance, darling. Either you start showing some appreciation for our protection, or things get unpleasant." Natasa watches them through the mirror behind the bar, noting positions, angles, distances. The Carson Boys have inadvertently positioned themselves perfectly. If this goes bad, she'll have clear lines of fire on the three biggest threats before they can react. Old habits die hard. "Protection," she repeats thoughtfully, buying time while scanning the room one final time. The other patrons have pressed themselves against the walls, trying to become invisible. Old Tom Murphy's hand has disappeared beneath his coat, where Natasa knows he keeps a derringer. She catches his eye and shakes her head slightly. "Not yet. Let them commit fully first." "That's right," Wade says, clearly annoyed that she's not properly terrified yet. "See, way I figure it. A pretty thing like you working alone in a place like this, lot of bad things could happen." His hand drops to his gun belt, casual but threatening. "Be a shame if something happened to that beautiful face." One of the younger outlaws by the window snickers, and Natasa catalogues the sound's location without turning her head. The sun has dropped lower, casting longer shadows across the saloon floor. Perfect conditions, really. Reminds her of that operation in Kandahar, when the target never saw the shot coming through the market crowd. "You're threatening me," she says, not a question but a confirmation, letting them dig their grave deeper. "Threatening?" Wade affects an innocent expression. No, just explaining the facts of life. Strong take what they want. Weak learn their place." He gestures expansively. "Way I see it, you got two choices. Make this easy on yourself, or—" His hand caresses his revolver's grip. "Well, let's just say the hard way ain't pretty." Natasa allows herself a small sigh, almost inaudible. It's always the same with their type. They mistake kindness for weakness, restraint for fear. She's lost count of how many targets made the same mistake right before her bullet found them across impossible distances. "That's an interesting philosophy," she says, echoing his earlier mock politeness. "Got a lot of experience with that, do you?" The scarred man takes a step forward, brass knuckles glinting. "You mocking us, girl?" "No," Natasa replies simply. "Just trying to understand your position." Her hand drifts casually toward the underside of the bar, where the Carson Boys assume. Marcus keeps his shotgun. They tense, ready for the expected threat, not realizing they're watching the wrong hand. Wade's patience finally snaps. "Enough talking. Boys, show this little lady what happens when—" The saloon's front door swings open, cutting him off. Every head turns except Natasa's. She's been tracking the newcomer's approach in the mirror for the last 30 seconds. Sheriff Rogers stumbles in, blood matting his gray hair where they'd struck him, but his eyes are clear and angry. "Everything okay in here?" he asks, voice steady despite the beating he's taken. His hand stays well away from his empty holster. They'd taken his gun when they jumped him. Wade turns slowly, his smile turning cruel. "Well, if it ain't the law up and about ahead of schedule." He nods to his men. "Guess we need to be more thorough next time." Natasa watches the tableau unfold in the mirror, noting how the Carson Boys have shifted their attention, spread their focus. Amateur mistake. Never take your eyes completely off any potential threat, even one that looks harmless. She'd learned that lesson early in her Marine days, taught it later to countless recruits. "Still got time to end this peacefully," she offers quietly, giving them one final chance, knowing they won't take it. Men like this never do. Wade turns back to her, irritation plain on his face. "Only thing ending here is your attitude, sweetheart. Boys, teach these fine folks about respect. Start with the mouthy one." The scarred man moves first, brass knuckles raised, confident in his approach toward a seemingly defenseless woman. His first mistake. Natasa's movement is so fluid, so economical, that it takes the Outlaws a full second to realize she's no longer behind the bar. The empty space where she stood hangs in their vision like an after-image. "What the—" Wade starts, but his words cut off as Natasa appears beside his lieutenant, her motion a blur of calculated precision. The scarred man swings his brass knuckles in a wide arc that would have been devastating if it had connected. Instead, he finds himself grasping empty air, his momentum carrying him forward into nothing. "You've had training," Natasa observes quietly, now standing at a perfect tactical distance. Her posture shifted subtly into something the Carson Boys are only just beginning to recognize. "Military? Confederate cavalry?" the scarred man snarls, adjusting his stance. 15th Virginia. He throws another punch, more measured this time, but Natasa isn't there either. Her movement is strange, unsettling. Not the desperate scramble of someone avoiding a fight, but the calculated repositioning of a predator. "Cavalry explains the sloppy footwork," she says, her voice carrying the same calm authority she once used to instruct Marine recruits. "You're still fighting like you're on horseback." She steps aside from another attack with minimal movement, letting his own momentum work against him. "In hand to hand, that'll get you killed." Wade's hand drops to his revolver, but Natasa's voice stops him. "I wouldn't." There's something in her tone that freezes him mid-motion, not fear or pleading, but absolute certainty. "You're wondering why I seem different," she continues, still calmly avoiding the scarred man's increasingly frustrated attacks. "Why something feels wrong about this situation." The younger outlaws exchange uncertain glances. They've never seen anyone move like this, never encountered someone who seems to treat their threatening presence as a mild inconvenience rather than a terror. Wade's eyes narrow, studying Natasa with new attention. "Who are you?" "Just a saloon girl," Natasa replies, but there's a hint of something else in her voice now, the echo of distant firefights and precision shots taken across impossible distances. The scarred man lunges again, and this time Natasa moves differently. Her response is a blur of efficient violence, and suddenly the brass knuckles clatter to the floor while their owner clutches his wrist, face contorted in pain. "That's a joint." "Lock they teach in Marine Corps, hand to hand," one of the younger outlaws says suddenly, his voice carrying a note of recognition and growing alarm. "I saw it during the war, when we—" He stops, face paling as understanding dawns. Natasa stands relaxed but ready, her stance deceptively casual. "3 tours, she says conversationally. "Scout sniper platoon. But that was another life." Her eyes meet Wade's, and he sees something there that makes him take an unconscious step back, the focused gaze of a predator far deadlier than himself. "You're lying," he manages. but his voice lacks conviction. Ain't no women in the Marines, especially not snipers. Natasa's smile is slight but genuine. You'd be surprised what people are capable of when you don't let assumptions blind you. Want to know my longest confirmed kill? She shifts her weight slightly, and every outlaw in the room tenses. 2,300 yards, sandstorm conditions, target was a warlord who thought he was untouchable in his mountain fortress. Sound familiar? The saloon has gone completely silent. Even the wounded Sheriff Rogers watches with newfound understanding, seeing past the carefully constructed facade of the quiet saloon girl to the warrior beneath. The Carson Boys' earlier confidence has evaporated, replaced by the dawning realization that they've made a terrible mistake. You're that ghost, the scarred man whispers, cradling his injured wrist. The one they talked about in the papers. The shadow that was dropping Taliban leaders like they were target practice. His eyes widen. They said it was a myth. Myths don't dislocate wrists, Natasa points out mildly, or teach Marine recruits how to survive in combat, or spend 3 years hunting the worst humanity has to offer across mountain ranges that make these hills look like anthills. She takes a single step forward, and every outlaw takes a collective step back. But you know what the real difference is between you and me. Wade's hand still hovers near his revolver, but there's sweat on his face now. What's that? I don't need to prove anything, Natasa says softly. I don't need to threaten people to feel strong. Real strength? She gestures to the sheriff, to Marcus, to the townspeople they'd tried to intimidate. Real strength is protecting people. Something you boys seem to have forgotten since your cavalry days. One of the younger outlaws has begun edging toward the door, but Natasa's voice stops him. Nobody moves. The command carries the weight of battlefield authority, freezing everyone in place. We're going to have a conversation about choices, about what happens next, about whether you want to leave this saloon under your own power or in pine boxes. The late afternoon sun slants through the windows, catching the brass shell casing of a single round that Natasa has produced from somewhere. She rolls it across her knuckles with practiced ease, a sniper's habit, a reminder of patience and precision. Though I should warn you, she adds, almost as an afterthought, if you choose violence, you should know something. What's that? Wade asks, trying to keep the tremor out of his voice. I never miss. Wade's face contorts with rage, pride overwhelming his survival instinct. Take her, he roars, drawing his revolver in a motion that would be impressive against any normal opponent. But Natasa Matthews isn't normal. Hasn't been since her first tour of duty. Her movement is liquid grace, combat-hardened reflexes honed by years of operating in the world's deadliest environments. Before Wade's gun clears its holster, she's already closed the distance between them. Her hand locks around his wrist with surgical precision, applying pressure to nerve points that send shocking pain up his arm. The revolver clatters to the floor unfired. 8 distinct ways to disarm an opponent, Natasa says conversationally, maintaining the grip as Wade struggles futilely. This is one of the kinder ones. She shifts her hold slightly, and the outlaw leader drops to his knees, face contorted, in agony. I could have broken your arm instead. Would you like me to demonstrate? The other Carson boys stand frozen, caught between their instinct to help their leader and the growing realization that they're facing something far beyond their experience. The scarred man, still nursing his injured wrist, takes a halting step. Forward. That's close enough, Natasa warns, her voice carrying the same calm authority she once used to command Marine fire teams. Unless you'd like me to dislocate your other wrist? Her eyes scan the room, taking in positions and angles with sniper's precision. You boys have a choice to make. Think carefully about it. One of the younger outlaws draws his gun with trembling hands. Let him go, or I'll... Natasa's movement is so fast it seems almost casual. Wade finds himself spun around, his own body used as a shield, while Natasa maintains the nerve hold that keeps him compliant. "You'll what?" she asks mildly. "Shoot. Through your boss? That's poor fire team discipline. Would have gotten you failed out of basic training." "Just shoot," Wade manages through gritted teeth, but his men hesitate. They've never faced someone like this. Someone who treats their threatening presence as a tactical exercise rather than a cause for fear. "You know what's interesting?" Natasa continues, adjusting her hold slightly when Wade tries to struggle. "In the Marines, they teach us that the most dangerous opponent isn't always the biggest or the loudest. It's the one who stays calm, who thinks 3 moves ahead." She addresses the room at large now, her voice carrying easily in the tense silence. "Right now, I'm thinking about angles of fire, cover positions, and how many of you I can incapacitate. Before you get off a single shot, what are you thinking about?" The younger outlaw's gun hand wavers. "You're bluffing. You can't take all of us." "Can't I?" There's something in Natasa's tone that makes several of the Carson boys take involuntary steps back. Want to know what else they teach Marine snipers? Patience. Precision, the ability to control every muscle, every breath, until the perfect moment presents itself. Her eyes meet each outlaw's gaze in turn. "I've spent years perfecting shots that had to thread between civilians in crowded markets. You think taking down a dozen poorly trained outlaws in an open saloon would be difficult?" The scarred man's face shows the first signs of real fear. "Boss, this ain't right. She moves like those special forces types we saw during the war, the ones you didn't know were there until your whole unit was down." "Scared of one woman?" Wade spits, though his bravado is undermined by the pain evident in his voice. "You're all..." His words cut off in a gasp as Natasa adjusts her hold again. "Let's talk about fear," she says quietly. "Real fear isn't about guns or threats or violence. Real fear is lying perfectly still for 3 days straight, controlling every breath, every heartbeat, while your target moves through your scope. Real fear is knowing that one twitch, one mistake, means failing your team, letting the enemy escape to kill more innocent people." Her voice carries the weight of experience that makes even the hardened outlaws listen. "What you boys do, that's not fear. That's just bullying, and I've killed better bullies than you across 3 continents." The tension in the room reaches a breaking point as the remaining Carson boys look to each other uncertainly. Their familiar dynamic of intimidation has been completely upended, replaced by something they don't understand and can't control. "Here's what's going to happen," Natasa continues, her voice now carrying the command presence that once directed Marine fire teams in combat zones. "You're all going to very slowly place your weapons on the floor. Then you're going to back away toward the wall. If anyone makes a sudden move, if anyone tries to be a hero," she lets the implication hang in the air. "Well, let's just say I've had a lot of practice dealing with people who make poor decisions." The younger outlaw's gun wavers again. "And if we don't," Natasa's smile is slight but genuine, "then I demonstrate exactly why Marine snipers are considered some of the deadliest fighters in the world. Your choice." She shifts her stance slightly, and Wade lets out another gasp of pain. "But I should warn you, I've got 3 separate ways to end this fight already planned out. 2 of them don't involve any permanent damage. 1 does. Which version we use is entirely up to you." "Wait," the youngest of the Carson boys speaks up suddenly, his voice carrying a note of recognition. "Staff Sergeant Matthews, from the 1st Marine Division?" The tremor in his voice is different now, not fear, but something closer to awe. You trained our unit in advanced marksmanship before we deployed. 3rd Battalion, 2018, Natasa." Studies him more carefully now, memory clicking into place. "Private James Cooper," she says softly. You had trouble with your breathing control, kept pulling your shots left under pressure. Her voice carries no judgment, only the calm assessment of an instructor remembering a student. Cooper lowers his weapon slowly, face showing a complex mix of emotions. You helped me correct my stance. Taught me that trick with counting heartbeats between shots. He swallows hard. Your training. It saved my life in Helmand Province. The atmosphere in the saloon shifts subtly as the other Carson Boys process. This revelation. Wade, still locked in Natasa's grip, tries to snarl something, but she adjusts her hold slightly, silencing him. What happened to you, Cooper? Natasa asks quietly. You had potential, real talent once you got your nerves under control. Her eyes scan his outfit, the worn leather and trail dust that speak of years on the wrong side of the law. This isn't what you trained for. Cooper's face falls, shame creeping into his expression. After we got back, nothing felt right. Couldn't sleep, couldn't settle. The gang, he glances at his fellow outlaws. They understood, or I thought they did, gave me something that felt like purpose again. Natasa's voice takes on the same tone she once used to mentor struggling recruits. Purpose isn't found in terrorizing innocent people, Cooper. You know better than that, we all do. Her gaze sweeps across the other Carson Boys. How many of you are veterans? How many served? Slowly, hesitantly, hands begin to raise. The scarred man, still cradling his wrist, speaks up. Confederate cavalry, like I said, but before that, 4th Infantry Division. Another man steps forward. 10th Mountain. A third voice from the back. 75th Rangers. Jesus Christ, Natasa breathes, real emotion coloring her voice for the first time. Look at you. Elite soldiers, trained warriors, reduced to common thugs. Is this what you fought for? What your brothers died for? The weight of her words settles, heavy in the room. Several of the Carson Boys can't meet her eyes now, their earlier bravado completely evaporated. Even Wade has stopped struggling, though whether from the pain of the hold or the impact of her words isn't clear. We lost our way, Cooper admits quietly. After the war, after everything we saw, everything we did. Civilian life felt like a bad dream. Nothing made sense anymore. He holsters his gun, slowly, deliberately. The gang gave us structure, hierarchy, a chain of command, like having a unit again. Natasa's voice carries understanding now, though her hold on Wade doesn't waver. I know that feeling. The disconnect, the restlessness, the way nothing civilian feels real enough or intense enough. Her eyes meet Cooper's. But this, threatening innocent people, terrorizing communities, that's not the answer. The scarred man shifts uncomfortably. What else is there? World doesn't want broken soldiers. The world needs warriors who remember their purpose, Natasa corrects firmly, who remember that strength isn't about intimidation, it's about protection, about standing between the innocent and those who would harm them. She adjusts her stance slightly, maintaining perfect control over Wade while addressing the room. You want purpose? Want to feel alive again? There are better ways. Like what? Someone asks from the back, voice carrying equal parts skepticism and hope. There's a veterans program in Denver, Natasa replies, run by former special forces. They help soldiers find their way back, provide training for civilian jobs, counseling for the nightmares I know you all still have. Her voice softens slightly. I know because I went through it myself. It's how I ended up here, tending bar instead of putting rounds through targets. Cooper takes another step forward, hope warring with uncertainty on his face. They'd take us after everything we've done? They took me, Natasa says simply, and I had a lot more red in my ledger than any of you. She maintains her hold on Wade, but her voice carries sincerity now, the same tone that once inspired Marines under her command. It's not easy. Nothing worthwhile is. But it's a chance to remember who you were before all this. A chance to be Warriors again, not thugs. The silence that follows is heavy with possibility. Several of the Carson boys exchange glances, something shifting in their expressions. The tension in the room has transformed from the threat of violence to the weight of choice. "Staff Sergeant," Cooper says finally, squaring his shoulders unconsciously, into a military bearing. We... He struggles for words. Years of outlaw life warring with the soldier he used to be. "It's not too late," Natasa tells him quietly. "It's never too late to find your way back to honor." Wade's face contorts with impotent rage as he kneels on the saloon floor, still locked in Natasa's iron grip. The other Carson boys stand frozen, caught between their old loyalties and the growing realization that they've been following the wrong path for far too long. "You think it's that easy?" Wade snarls, his voice thick with pain and anger. "You think a few pretty words can erase who we are? What we've done?" Natasa's hold doesn't waver, but her voice carries a note of empathy now. "No, it's not easy. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do." She looks around the room, meeting the eyes of each veteran in turn, facing the weight of your actions, owning the mistakes you've made, and choosing to be better. That takes more courage than any firefight or outlaw raid. Cooper steps forward, his face a mix of shame and determination. "Staff Sergeant, I'm sorry for what I've become, for forgetting what you taught us." He straightens his shoulders, a glimmer of the soldier he once was surfacing. "I want to make it right. I want to find that purpose again, the one we had before everything went to hell." Natasa nods, a flicker of pride in her eyes. "That's the first step, Cooper. Admitting you want to change." She addresses the room at large. "I won't lie to you, the road back isn't easy. You'll have to face the things you've done, the people you've hurt. You'll have to work every day to be better than you were the day before." The scarred man shifts uneasily. "What if we can't? What if we're too far gone?" "No one is too far gone," Natasa says firmly. "I've seen men come back from darker places than you can imagine. It takes time, it takes work, but it's possible." Her gaze settles on Wade, still seething with barely contained rage. "But it has to be your choice. No one can make it for you." In the tense silence that follows, the Carson boys look to each other, a silent conversation passing between them. Years of shared history, of battles fought and wounds nursed, hang heavy in the air, but beneath that, a new possibility stirs, the chance to reclaim something they thought lost forever. "I'm in," Cooper says quietly, his voice gaining strength. As he speaks, "I'm tired of being an outlaw, tired of hurting folks instead of helping them." He looks to his companions. "We were soldiers once. We had honor. We can find that again." Slowly, hesitantly at first, the others begin to nod. The scarred man uncurls his injured hand, looking at the brass knuckles as if seeing them for the first time. "I never wanted this," he admits softly. "I just didn't know how to be anything else." He meets Natasa's gaze. "You think that program in Denver, you think they'd take a broken old cavalry soldier?" Natasa's smile is gentle but genuine. "They'd welcome you with open arms." She looks around the room. "They'd welcome all of you if you're willing to put in the work." One by one, the Carson boys begin to lay down their weapons. Revolvers, knives, brass knuckles. The tools of their outlaw trade clatter to the saloon floor. It's a symbolic gesture, but one heavy with meaning, a decision to leave violence behind, to reach for something better. Only Wade remains defiant, his face twisted with hatred. "You're all fools," he spits. "Weak, spineless cowards. You think you can just walk away? Leave me behind?" Natasa's hold tightens slightly, a reminder of the control she wields. "They're not leaving you behind, Wade. They're choosing to move forward." Her voice is calm but firm. "You can make that choice too. It's not too late, even for you." But Wade's Eyes hold no flicker of remorse, no hint of the man he might once have been. "To hell with you," he snarls. "To hell with all of you. I'll see you dead before I let you turn my boys against me." In a flash of movement, Wade wrenches free of Natasa's hold, his hand scrabbling for the fallen revolver. The other Carson boys. They cry out in alarm, but Natasa is already moving. Her foot comes down hard on Wade's wrist, pinning his gun hand to the floor. "Last chance, Wade," she says softly, her voice carrying the weight of finality. "Yield, and we can all walk out of here. No one else needs to get hurt." But Wade's eyes hold only fury, a lifetime of anger and violence boiling over. "Never!" he hisses, straining against Natasa's hold. "I'll die before I yield to you." Natasa's sigh is heavy with regret. "I was afraid you'd say that." In a blur of motion, she drops low, her knee driving into Wade's sternum with calculated force. The outlaw leader's breath leaves him in a whoosh, his body going slack as unconsciousness acclaims him. A stunned silence falls over the saloon, broken only by the distant ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner. Natasa straightens slowly, her gaze sweeping the room, taking in the expressions of shock and awe on the faces of the Carson boys, former outlaws, now men standing on the cusp of a new beginning. "All right," she says briskly, the command presence of a Marine sergeant coming to the fore. "Let's get this place cleaned up. Sheriff, if you wouldn't mind escorting Wade here to a nice, secure cell." She glances at the still unconscious outlaw. "I think he's going to need some time to cool off." As the sheriff moves to comply, Natasa turns her attention to the rest of the Carson boys. "As for the rest of you, I meant what I said. That veterans program in Denver, it's real and it's waiting for you." She pulls a small card from her pocket, offering it to Cooper. "This is the contact information. Tell them Staff Sergeant Matthews sent you. They'll know what to do." Cooper takes the card reverently, his fingers tracing the edges as if holding a talisman. "Thank you," he says softly, his voice thick with emotion. For everything, for reminding us who we used to be, who we could be again." Natasa's smile is warm, her eyes carrying a glimmer of the mentor she once was. "You always had it in you, Cooper. All of you did. You just needed someone to help you remember." She looks around the saloon, taking in the faces of these men, veterans, warriors, lost souls finally finding their way back to the light. It won't be easy. The road ahead, it's going to test you in ways you can't imagine. But if you stick together, if you lean on each other and remember your training, you'll make it through. You'll find your purpose again. As the men begin to file out of the saloon, their steps hesitant but filled with new determination, Natasa feels a weight lift from her shoulders. It's a familiar feeling, the same one she used to experience after a successful mission, the knowledge that she's made a difference, that she's used her skills and training to help others find their way. She knows their journey is just beginning, that they'll face challenges and setbacks and moments of doubt. But she also knows the strength that lies within them, the unbreakable bond forged in the crucible of combat and tempered by the fires of shared experience. As the last of the men step out into the fading light of the setting sun, Natasa allows herself a moment of quiet reflection. She thinks of her own journey, the long and winding road that led her from the battlefields of Afghanistan to this quiet mountain town. She thinks of the men and women she served with, the ones who made it back and the ones who didn't. And she thinks of the warriors she's just set on a new path, the ones who will carry the lessons she's taught them out into a world that so desperately needs their strength and honor. With a final nod to herself, Natasa turns back to the saloon, ready to face whatever challenges the evening may bring. She knows that her own journey is far from over, that there will always be those who need her help, her guidance, her unwavering commitment to justice and righteousness. But for now, in this moment, she allows herself to feel the warmth of a battle, well fought and a mission accomplished. She is Staff Sergeant Natasa Matthews, United States Marine Corps Scout Sniper, and she is exactly where she's meant to be, as the sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows across the dusty streets of Silver Creek. Natasa finds herself back in the familiar rhythms of the saloon. She moves between tables with practiced ease, refreshing drinks, and offering friendly smiles to the regulars who filter in as the evening wears on. But beneath the surface, she can feel a change in the air. News of the confrontation with the Carson Boys has spread quickly, and there's a new undercurrent of respect in the way the patrons regard her. It's not the wary deference of those cowed by violence, but the genuine admiration of people who've witnessed true strength and courage. Old Tom Murphy, his earlier fear forgotten, raises his glass to Natasa as she passes. "Mighty fine thing you did today, Miss Natasa," he says, his weathered face creasing into a smile, standing up to those outlaws, giving them boys a chance to be something better. "Takes a rare sort of person to do that." Natasa pauses, meeting Tom's gaze with a warm smile of her own. "They just needed a reminder of who they really are, Tom. Sometimes, when you've been lost in the darkness long enough, you forget there's still light inside you." The old prospector nods sagely, his eyes carrying the weight of his own hard-lived experiences. "Ain't that the truth? The world can be a harsh place, make you forget the good you've got in you." He raises his glass again, this time in a silent toast to the woman before him. "Glad folks like you are around to remind us, Miss Natasa. Glad indeed." As Natasa continues her rounds, she can't help but feel a sense of hope blossoming in her chest. The events of the day have shown her that change is possible, that even the most lost and broken souls can find their way back to the light. It's a powerful reminder of why she does what she does, why she's chosen this path of service and redemption. But even as she savors this moment of triumph, Natasa knows that the road ahead is far from easy. The Carson Boys may have laid down their arms, but there are other dangers lurking in the shadows of Silver Creek. Outlaws and desperados drawn to the promise of the town's growing prosperity, men who won't be swayed by words and wisdom. As if summoned by her thoughts, the saloon doors swing open, admitting a figure that sends a ripple of unease through the room. He's a tall man, lean and wiry, with a face weathered by sun and sin. His eyes, cold and calculating, sweep the room with the assurance of a predator sizing up his prey. Natasa recognizes him instantly. Elias Walker, a notorious outlaw with a reputation for ruthlessness and a trail of blood stretching from Texas to the Dakota Territories. He's a man who revels in violence, who sees the world as a brutal, unforgiving place where only the strong survive. Walker saunters up to the bar, his spurs jingling with each step. He leans against the polished wood, his gaze fixing on Natasa with an intensity that would make a lesser woman quail. "Well, well," he drawls, his voice carrying the lazy menace of a coiled rattlesnake. "If it isn't the famous Natasa Matthews, the saloon girl who thinks she's a soldier." Natasa meets his gaze evenly, her posture relaxed but alert. "I am a soldier, Mr. Walker, and I don't take kindly to those who threaten innocent people in my town." Walker's laugh is sharp and brittle, like breaking glass. "Your town? I don't see your name on it, sweetheart." He leans closer, his breath hot against Natasa's face. "I go where I please, and I take what I want. And right now what I want is for you to stay out of my way." Natasa doesn't flinch, doesn't give an inch. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Mr. Walker. You see, I've sworn an oath to protect the people of this town, and I take my oaths very seriously." Walker's eyes narrow, his hand drifting toward the gun at his hip. "You think you can stop me, little lady? You think you're fast enough, tough enough to take on Elias Walker?" In a flash, Natasa's hand is on her own weapon, the Colt clearing leather with blinding speed, the clicks of a dozen other hammers being thumbed back echo through the sudden silence of the saloon as the patrons rally to Natasa's defense. "I know I am," Natasa says softly, her voice carrying the calm certainty of a sniper lining up a shot. "But more importantly, the people of Silver Creek are. They've seen what happens when good folks stand together against evil. They won't let you or your kind terrorize them anymore." Walker's face twists with rage, his hand twitching towards his gun. But as he looks around the room, taking in the resolute faces of the townspeople, the cold muzzles of their weapons trained on him, he seems to think better of it. With a snarl of frustration, he backs away from the bar, his eyes never leaving Natasa's. "This ain't over, Matthews," he hisses, his voice dripping with venom. "You think you've won something here, but all you've done is paint a target on your back, on this whole damn town." He spits on the floor, his gaze sweeping the room with contempt. "I'll be back, and when I am, you'll all learn what happens to those who cross Elias Walker." With a final menacing glare, Walker turns on his heel and stalks out of the saloon, the doors swinging shut behind him with a bang. In the silence that follows, Natasa slowly lowers her weapon, her heart hammering in her chest. She knows that Walker's threat is far from idle. Men like him, men who've built their lives on violence and intimidation, don't make promises they don't intend to keep. He'll be back, and he won't be alone. But as Natasa looks around the room, taking in the determined faces of the Silver Creek residents, she feels a swell of pride and resolve. These people, her people, have seen the worst that the frontier has to offer. They've faced down outlaws and desperados, drought and disease, the unforgiving wilderness that threatens to swallow them whole. And yet, they're still here, still standing, still fighting for the life they've built in this rugged, beautiful land. They've chosen to make their stand here, in this small mountain town that's become a beacon of hope and resilience in a world that so often seems dark and unforgiving. Natasa knows that the battles to come won't be easy. Walker and his ilk will bring violence and chaos, will test the resolve of Silver Creek in ways they've never been tested before. But she also knows that they won't face these challenges alone. As she holsters her weapon, meeting the eyes of the men and women around her with a nod of solidarity and respect, Natasa feels the weight of her own resolve settle into place. She is Staff Sergeant Natasa Matthews, a warrior sworn to protect the innocent, to stand against the darkness no matter the cost, and she knows with a certainty that goes beyond mere faith or hope that Silver Creek will never fall, as long as there are those willing to stand together in its defense, as long as there are those who remember that the light of courage and compassion can never be fully extinguished, no matter how deep the shadows may grow. With a final, determined nod, Natasa turns back to her duties, ready to face whatever the night may bring, ready to stand tall in the face of whatever dangers may come, secure in the knowledge that she does not stand alone. For in Silver Creek, in this small, defiant bastion of the human spirit, even the darkest of nights must eventually give way to the promise of a new dawn. The days following Elias Walker's ominous visit to the Silver Creek Saloon are filled with a tense, watchful energy. The townspeople go about their daily lives with a new sense of purpose, their eyes constantly scanning the horizon for signs of trouble. They know that Walker's threat was not an idle one, that he will return with reinforcements, intent on making good on his promise to teach Silver Creek a brutal lesson. But even in the face of this looming danger, the residents of the small mountain town refuse to be cowed. They rally around Natasa, their respect for the quiet saloon girl transformed into something deeper, more resolute. In her, they see a leader, a protector, a symbol of the indomitable spirit that has carried them through so many trials and hardships. Under Natasa's guidance, the town begins to prepare for the coming storm. The sheriff and his deputies, their ranks bolstered by volunteers from among the townspeople, begin regular patrols of the surrounding hills and valleys, watching for any sign of Walker and his gang. The blacksmith works day and night, repairing old weapons and forging new ones, while the shopkeepers and merchants stockpile supplies, determined to weather whatever siege may come. But it is Natasa herself who becomes the linchpin of Silver Creek's defenses. She works tirelessly, training the townspeople in the art of combat, teaching them the skills she learned in the Marines. She shows them how to shoot, how to move, how to work together as a unit, transforming a collection of farmers, miners, and shopkeepers into a disciplined fighting force. In the evenings, when the work is done and the town gathers in the saloon to share news and strategies, Natasa becomes a different kind of leader. She listens to their fears and concerns, offers words of encouragement and wisdom, reminds them of the strength and resilience that has brought them this far. She becomes a source of hope and inspiration, a beacon of light in the gathering darkness. As the days turn into weeks and the weeks into months, the tension in Silver Creek grows ever tighter. Walker's return is a constant specter on the horizon, a shadow that looms over every waking moment. But even as the waiting takes its toll, Natasa refuses to let despair take hold. She knows that this is the calm before the storm, the deep breath before the plunge. She knows that when Walker comes, he will bring hell with him, a maelstrom of violence and chaos that will test Silver Creek to its very limits. But she also knows that they will be ready, that the quiet strength and determination of these people will see them through no matter the cost. And so, Natasa continues to train, to plan, to prepare. She spends long hours in the hills, scouting out defensive positions, plotting lines of fire and fallback points. She works with the sheriff and his deputies to develop contingency plans, to anticipate every possible angle of attack. And she prays, in the quiet moments when no one is watching, for the strength and wisdom to lead her people through the coming trial. But even as she pours her heart and soul into the defense of Silver Creek, Natasa knows that the true battle will not be fought with guns and bullets alone. She knows that the real test will come not in the heat of combat, but in the quiet moments that follow when the smoke clears and the wounds begin to heal. For Natasa understands, with a clarity born of hard-won experience, that violence can only breed more violence, that hatred and vengeance can only lead to a cycle of endless suffering. She knows that if Silver Creek is to have any hope of a true and lasting peace, it must find a way to break this cycle, to choose a different path. And so even as she prepares for war, Natasa begins to lay the groundwork for peace. She reaches out to the other communities in the area, forging alliances and building bridges of understanding. She works to create a network of support and cooperation, a web of shared purpose that will endure long after the current crisis has passed. In the quiet moments of reflection, Natasa often finds herself thinking of the Carson Boys, of the lost and broken men she helped to find their way back to the light. She thinks of Cooper, of the scarred man, of all the others who chose to leave violence behind and seek a new path. And she draws strength from their example, from the knowledge that redemption is possible, even in the darkest of times. As the long, tense days of waiting draw to a close, and the first signs of Walker's approach begin to appear on the horizon, Natasa feels a sense of calm descend over her. She knows that the battle to come will be the greatest test she has ever faced, that it will demand everything she has to give and more. But she also knows that she is not alone, that the strength and courage of Silver Creek stands with her, unbreakable and unyielding. She knows that whatever the future may bring, they will face it together, as a community, as a family, bound by ties of love and loyalty that no force on earth can break. And so, as the sun begins to set on the eve of battle, Natasa takes her place at the head of the defenses, her rifle in hand, her heart filled with a fierce, unwavering determination. She looks out over the town she has come to call home, at the faces of the people she has sworn to protect, and she makes a silent promise to herself and to them. No matter what comes, no matter what horrors the night may bring, Natasa Matthews will stand tall. She will fight with every ounce of strength and skill she possesses to defend this small, precious corner of the world and the brave, indomitable souls who call it home. For in the end, Natasa knows it is not the strength of arms or the speed of a trigger finger that will win the day. It is the strength of the human spirit, the unbreakable bond of community and compassion that will see them through, no matter how dark the night may grow. And with that knowledge, that unshakable faith, Natasa raises her rifle to her shoulder and prepares to meet the coming storm, head-on and unafraid. The first shots ring out just as the sun begins to crest the eastern hills, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire. From her vantage point atop the saloon roof, Natasa sees the distant figures of Walker and his men, their silhouettes dark against the growing light. They ride hard, closing the distance to Silver Creek with alarming speed, their hoofbeats a thunder that echoes across the valley. But Silver Creek is ready. As the first bullets whip past, the townspeople spring into action, taking up positions behind barricades and in upper-story windows, their weapons primed and ready. The sheriff and his deputies, their faces grim with determination, lead a charge to meet the outlaws head-on, while Natasa and her hand-picked team of marksmen provide covering fire from the rooftops. The battle is joined in earnest, a cacophony of gunfire and shouted orders, of whinnying horses and shattering glass. The air grows thick with the acrid smell of gunpowder and the coppery tang of blood. As men and women on both sides fall, their cries of pain and fury mingling in a hellish chorus. Through it all, Natasa remains a pillar of calm, her rifle moving with practiced precision as she picks off the outlaws one by one. She is in her element here, the chaos of battle as familiar to her as the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat. She directs her team with crisp, clear commands, her voice cutting through the din like a knife. But even as the people of Silver Creek fight with all the skill and courage at their command, it soon becomes clear that they are outmatched. Walker's gang is larger than they anticipated and better armed, with a seemingly endless supply of ammunition and a ruthless disregard for their own safety. They press the attack with a ferocity that borders on madness, hurling themselves against the defenses of the town again and again, heedless of the toll in blood and lives. As the battle wears on and the toll begins to mount, Natasa feels a cold, not of fear, begin to form in her gut. She has seen this before in the dust and heat of Afghanistan, in the bloody chaos of the war. She knows that there is a tipping point in every battle, a moment when the tide turns and all hope of victory begins to fade. She cannot let that happen here, cannot let Silver Creek fall to the forces of darkness and despair. And so, with a fierce, primal yell, Natasa leaps down from her perch and charges into the fray, her rifle blazing, her heart pounding with a savage, unyielding determination. She fights as she has never fought before, a whirlwind of precision and fury, her every movement, a study in deadly grace. She takes down outlaws left and right, dodging and weaving through a hail of bullets, her own aim never wavering. She is a force of nature, a one-woman army, a living embodiment of the warrior spirit that burns at the heart of Silver Creek. And yet even as she fights with all the strength and skill she possesses, Natasa knows that it will not be enough. Walker's gang is too strong, too numerous, and they are slowly but surely gaining ground. The townspeople are fighting bravely, but they are growing weary, their ammunition running low, their ranks thinning with every passing minute. It is then, in that moment of darkest despair, that Natasa sees them, riding over the crest of a nearby hill, their horses lathered with sweat and their faces set with grim determination. Come the Carson Boys. Led by Cooper at the front, they charge into the fray, their weapons blazing, their battle cries ringing. Out across the valley, they fight with a skill and ferocity that takes even Natasa by surprise, their movements fluid and coordinated, their every shot finding its mark. They cut through the ranks of Walker's gang like a scythe through wheat, turning the tide of battle in a matter of moments. And at their head rides Cooper, a man transformed, his eyes blazing with a fierce, righteous fire. He fights like a man, possessed, his every movement a testament to the warrior spirit that Natasa helped to rekindle within him. He is a leader now, a true hero, a shining example of what a man can become when he chooses to stand for something greater than himself. With the arrival of the Carson Boys, the battle turns, the tide of violence and chaos receding like a dark tide before the rising sun. Walker's gang, seeing their advantage slipping away, begin to falter, their resolve crumbling in the face of this unexpected resistance. And then, in a moment that will live forever in the annals of Silver Creek's history, Natasa Matthews and Cooper stand side by side, their weapons raised in unison, their voices ringing out as one. They call for the surrender of the remaining outlaws, offering them a choice, to lay down their arms and seek redemption, or to face the full might of Silver Creek's united stand. To the amazement of all, more than a few of Walker's men choose the path of surrender, tossing their weapons to the ground and raising their hands in a gesture of submission. They have seen the writing on the wall, have felt the tide of battle turning against them, and they know that their only hope lies in the mercy of the victors. Natasa exchanges a glance with Cooper, a look of shared triumph, shared relief. Together, they move through the battlefield, ensuring that the prisoners are secured, that the wounded and dead on both sides are tended to. They do what needs to be done. These warriors of Silver Creek, these defenders of peace and justice. As the smoke begins to clear and the echoes of battle fade, the people of Silver Creek slowly emerge from their homes, taking in the scene of carnage and chaos with mixed emotions. There is sorrow for the fallen, gratitude for the survivors, and a bone-deep weariness that comes from having endured the unendurable. But there is also hope, bright and shining, in the faces of the townspeople as they look to Natasa and Cooper, to the sheriff and his deputies, to all those who stood tall in the face of darkness and emerged victorious. They know that the battle is far from over, that there will be more trials and tribulations to come, but they also know that they are not alone, that they have each other, and that together they can weather any storm. For in the end, that is the true strength of Silver Creek, not the speed of a bullet or the skill of a marksman, but the unbreakable bonds of community, of love and loyalty that tie them together, now and forever. As the sun climbs higher into the sky, bathing the battered town in its golden light, Natasa feels a sense of peace descend upon her, a feeling of rightness and purpose that she has not known in a long, long time. She looks out over the faces of her friends, her comrades, her family, and she knows that she has found her true home, her true calling, for she is Natasa Matthews, the warrior of Silver Creek, the defender of the innocent and the champion of the just. And as long as there are people like her, people willing to stand tall in the face of adversity and fight for what is right, then there will always be hope, always be a chance for a better tomorrow. As the people of Silver Creek begin to rebuild, Natasa and Cooper work tirelessly to ensure that the town's newfound sense of unity and purpose endures. They organize patrols, train new deputies, and work to strengthen the bonds of community that have seen them through their darkest hour. In the weeks and months that follow, Silver Creek begins to thrive as never before. New businesses open, new families arrive, drawn by the promise of a fresh start in a town that has become a symbol of hope and resilience. And at the heart of it all stands Natasa Matthews, the quiet saloon girl turned warrior, the woman who showed a town the true meaning of courage and compassion. She becomes a legend in her own time, a shining example of the best that humanity has to offer. Years pass, and the story of Silver Creek spreads far and wide, inspiring others to stand tall in the face of adversity, to fight for what is right, no matter the cost. And always, at the center of those stories is the name of Natasa Matthews, the hero who taught a town to believe in itself. So if you've enjoyed this tale of courage, redemption, and the unbreakable strength of the human spirit, be sure to subscribe to our channel. There are many more stories to be told, many more adventures waiting to be shared. Join us, won't you? Together, we can keep the legend of Silver Creek alive, now and always.